Tiger fans, welcome to episode 286 of the official Tiger Talk with the 1400 Club podcast, bringing you all the latest news, updates, and buzz surrounding your mighty JSU Tigers. I am the Corey C. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast to be notified of all future episodes. Apple Podcasts and Spotify video users rate and review the show. And everyone, go follow Tiger Talk with the 1400 Club on Facebook and Tiger Talk 1400 on Instagram and Twitter. It all helps the cause, which is the I love Jackson State University. Fans, it is that time of year, the one that we look forward to every single year. Those Southern Jaguars are coming to town. Always a big game, but this season it'll be even bigger than ever for obvious reasons that we'll get into. And we brought on a special guest who covers the team to tell us about this version of those Jaguars. He is a freelance writer who covers the Southern Jaguars for The Advocate down in Baton Rouge, and he is an award-winning writer, none other than Mr. Jim Kleinpeter. Welcome to Tiger Talk with 1400 Club.
Thank you for having me, Corey.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Obviously, you're very knowledgeable of the team, so we just want to get an idea of what we can expect. You can throw records out of the window when these teams meet. So it doesn't matter how the teams are looking going in. It's going to be a battle. It's a big rivalry, but definitely want to get down into the specifics of it. Now, this team obviously was picked to come out of the West. Right now, 5-2 overall, 3-1 in the SWAC. So they're living up to those expectations so far. So we'll get into the specifics of the team, but first, can we just start out with your quick general thoughts on how the season has gone so far for the team?
Well, they had a little bit of a hiccup early on. Losing 24-0 to Texas Southern is still the most surprising thing that's happened all year. Everything else probably went according to plan. And I didn't really know that they would be in first place, but they restocked their rosters is one thing that they did, and they overstocked it. So they've got depth. Something that they didn't have last year. They had a few good frontline players last year, but they didn't have near the ability to rotate at every position like they do. So, and I think people were a little concerned about that first game. Eric Dooley kind of checked all the boxes for him as a hire, but then that happened, and it's like, okay, what's this about? But I think he's pretty much righted himself, and he's about where they want him to be.
Definitely things look to be going in the right direction since that hiccup that you mentioned. As expected, last Saturday, a win against Virginia Lynchburg. So let's just rewind back to a week prior versus Alcorn. Definitely a big showdown in the West, a game that had a SWAC West title implications. Alcorn seems to have had Southern's number in recent years. So talk about that game and how big of a win it was for the program.
It was very big, and it's probably unlike any of their other victories in that they really had to scrap for it. They didn't score in the second half of that game. They scored 3 touchdowns in the first half. It looked like they were on their way, but then Alcorn just started running the ball and really practically they forced Southern to try to run it themselves by dropping 8 people into coverage. So the Southern hardly threw a pass in the second half, and it was only until they finally stopped them on 4th down that they were able to actually move the ball a little bit and kill the remainder of the time on the clock. So it was a good victory for Southern in that Southern fought hard and had to overcome some adversity and really had to fight hard in the second half to win it. Every other game they've won this year, they've won going away. So that helped them a lot with their own self-image, I think.
Right. So if you couple that win with with Alcorn's loss last week versus Texas Southern, right? The Jags are in control of the West, and of course, Prairie View still has something to say about that. And Southern still has some games, FAMU notably coming up. But they have to like where they are headed into this BoomBox Classic versus Jackson State, wouldn't you think?
Absolutely, yeah. It's as good as they could have hoped for. They really took the measure of Prairie View. I thought that might be the toughest game for them. But if they, I don't think they're going to win Saturday. But they definitely shouldn't be favored. But even if they lose that game, I think they still got an inside track on the West title. The remainder of the schedule, they've got to get by Florida A&M, which is going to be tough. But I said at the beginning of the season, if they could split those 2 games, Jackson State and Florida A&M, I thought that they would have an excellent chance of winning the West. And that's what's going to happen. But it's going to be, the tiebreakers look like they're going to come into play, and it looks like, as usual, the Bayou Classic will end up meaning the difference between somebody going to the title game or not.
So a very talented ball club. You mentioned, stocking this roster and having the depth. 5 preseason all-conference selections. So let's start on offense. The Jags ranked 3rd in the SWAC in scoring, 31 points a game, 433 yards, but almost half of those yards come on the ground. So their rushing attack seems to be their bread and butter, right?
Yeah, it's funny. It's not really like that, though. It's like they become a passing. But you're right. It looks like it should be, but they're still running the ball like they did before. I mean, I think they led the league in rushing every year that I've covered them now. And but they're doing it in a different way now. In the past, under Dawson Odoms and even under the coach last year, the interim coach, they had more of a power running game. They ran at you on 1st and 2nd down, and then they threw on 3rd down, and they were very successful at it. They road graded you with their offensive line. Right now, their quarterback is their leading rusher, and they have a stable of backs. And they do run the ball, but they want to throw it, and they attack you like inside out. Or outside in. They want to throw downfield and make you stop them, and then they run the ball at you. So Bashawn McCray is a guy that played at Hines there in Jackson, and he has he really had a bad outing against Texas Southern. It wasn't all his fault, but he has developed into quite a nice quarterback, especially when it comes to running the ball, because he'll run some design plays, but they don't run him till late in the game when he's been handed off, and he fakes a handoff and nobody's on him. So that's something Jackson State would have to look for.
So the quarterback, Bashawn McCray, you talked about him leading the team in rushing. That's interesting. That's rare to see that. So talk about his game. Is that by design? Are those runs design, or he's just a guy who likes to improvise?
He does scramble well, but I think they got him settled down to where he stays in the pocket a little bit more now. He had itchy feet early in the season, and I think there was some communication problems with the receivers. But I mean, there are some design runs, but I don't think they want to run him too many times, because you don't want to get your quarterback hurt. So he'll run a design run, maybe 4 or 5 design runs a game. And then the rest of what he gets on they play some of that RPO. So you'll see that RPO, and I think that will be particularly a big part of their game plan against Jackson, because they've got to they've got to do something to deceive the defense. Jackson's got good defenders, and they're going to have to do something on the ends, on the flanks, to attack them and make them make decisions. So I think, it's mostly there is some design runs, and there is some scramble yardage in his total.
Yeah, definitely a guy for Jackson State to watch out for. A former 2-star quarterback, so definitely some talent there. Now, when he does pass the ball, he seems to be pretty accurate, a 67% completion ratio. Now, this Jackson State defense like to make they like to make the opposing offense do the things that they don't like doing, that they're uncomfortable with. So, how threatening is this offense if he has to beat you with his arm? You kind of talk about that recipe that Alcorn used in the second half. So, if it's on him and he has to beat you with his arm, how much of a threat does he pose?
Well, it remains to be seen, because he really hasn't had to do that, and that's what I was saying in the Alcorn game. He didn't really, he had a lot of yardage passing in the first half. He got most of his yardage that day and both of his touchdowns, and then they still won the game, even though he didn't really throw the ball much in the second half. It just depends on how much Southern can run the ball on Jackson State. I'm interested to see, because they've got a good offensive line again. It seems like they have one every year.
Yeah, and, absolutely.
They can definitely but their running plays are different. They're a little bit different. And there's a little bit of razzle dazzle to it, but they've got different types of runners. They've got they got the one power back in Sims, and then they got a couple of guys who can flash and dash, like Kendrick Rhymes and Carl Ligon. So they can hit you a couple of different ways. And I think if Jackson State can shut down Southern's run game, it'll be just a matter of time.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, speaking of the, you talked about the wide receivers. As I look at this team, I don't see a wide receiver with over 300 receiving yards, and that's through 7 games. So is this a deep wide receiver unit where everything's spread out, or they're just not passing the ball enough for those guys to get their numbers? And who are those guys? I see a couple names like Allen, Petrie, and I think Whitfield. I was just talking about their receiving core.
Yeah, Allen Petrie, and who's the other guy? Rudy Dyson. He's a Tulane transfer.
Okay.
Those three guys are all built the same. They're all about 6'1" and close to 200. They're big guys, and they like to throw the ball up to them and let them go and get it. And they've been effective with that. They've got all three have got good hands, and they've played much better. Whitfield is the guy who. He had a lot of success early in the season, and then he kind of got shut down a little bit. He's a smaller receiver, about 5'9", 5'10", who gets in the slot, and they like to throw to him these little crossing patterns to him. They like to put him in motion and get him on the run, so people have to try to keep up with him. But they also like to throw to their backs. There's the backs have been catching a lot of passes this year. They have you'll see 1 or 2 or 3 swing passes every game, just a simple swing pass, almost just a glorified pitch out almost. And you'll see quite a bit of that. But those 3 guys I mentioned to you, Dyson, Petrie, and Allen, are all big guys, like to go up and get the ball and use their size to create space and keep the defensive backs, keep themselves between the defensive back and the ball.
Right. So you talked about Jackson State's ability, if they're able to shut down the run, that could be a huge key and ultimately decide the game. But as we record this, there's a 100% chance of rain in Jackson on Saturday. And Jackson State's offense, of course, favors the pass. Southern obviously can get it done on the ground. Jackson State can get it done on the ground, but a pass first team. So could the weather play a difference? Could that possibly work in Southern's favor if it rains as expected?
Oh, definitely could. And I wouldn't be fooled by, I was looking at the stats, and Jackson State is 6th in the league in rushing. 167 yards a game is pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a lot of teams would take that every week.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, but I think it's for Jackson State, it seems like it's because they throw the ball and they don't really need to run it as much as they do because they've got probably the best quarterback in the league. So it could be a factor. It's been a long time since I've been to a game that where it rained, and Jackson has a natural turf field, don't they? Is it? It's grass. So yeah, it could. I was asking the coach about this. I asked Dooley about this the other day, and he said we're not working. He wouldn't say anything about it, but they know, and I think they know it might give them an advantage. And I even asked them a little bit about it, and the guys were telling me, man, it's been a long time. I don't think a lot of teams play on these artificial fields, and even though they get wet, they don't really hurt the passing game as much as when you get on a natural turf field and there's mud instead of just water. So it definitely could be a big factor.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So defensively, this team is pretty stout, only allowing 14 points a game, less than 300 yards per game. That's in conference play. So the strength seems to be the D-line. And some people believe that Southern's D-line is better than Jackson State's D-line, right? And Jackson State leads the FCS in defense. So 2 guys stand out as far as name-wise, very familiar names throughout the SWAC. One's a former 2-time All-SWAC player, 2022 preseason All-SWAC first team. Of course, that's Jason Dumas. He came over from Prairie View with Coach Eric Dooley, and he's a pro prospect. And then there's Jordan Lewis, a former SWAC Defensive Player of the Year and a Buck Buchanan Award winner. But they've both been slowed by some injuries, and their numbers aren't what you'd expect. So start there. Let's talk about their season with those 2 specifically.
Yeah, Dumas missed the first 3 games, and then I think that was the plan all along because they had the open date right after Texas Southern. So that gave him 4 weeks. And I think what it was, he was recovering from off-season shoulder surgery. And they kept it pretty secret. I think they put him on the field against LSU just to give him a chance to play 1 or 2 plays in that game. But He's been good lately. He didn't play last week. I think he was one of the players suspended for the
Okay.
Prairie View fight, and I
Okay.
don't think he was really involved in it. It looked like he was trying to separate people. But yeah, he's been very good, and they have some depth behind him, so he doesn't have to play every down. But he gets penetration. He requires a double team sometimes, because sometimes he's one of those players that he'll be back in the backfield before the handoff is made, and I'm sure the Jackson State coaching staff got an eyeful of him in the championship game last year when he was playing for Prairie View. And he does have some next level talent. He's kind of small.
Yeah.
You know, he's not quite what you want, but you know, he does have quickness up there. Jordan Lewis is going through kind of a season like he went through last year. He got off to a good start. He got 3 sacks in his first 3 games. Then he pulled a hamstring, and he hasn't been the same. And I think he was also suspended last week. He played a little bit against Alcorn, but did not play in the second half. I don't know what his health situation is. Dooley does not talk about injuries at all. But the best thing about Southern's defensive line is the depth they have there. They had a guy that transferred from McNeese, Cameron Peterson, and he's a guy they play at tackle and end. And then they got another transfer from Nicholls State who his name is Taj Brown, and he's second in the league with 6.5 sacks. He had 3 last week. So their defensive line is quite good. It's probably the strength of the defense, which has not allowed a touchdown in the second half to a SWAC team this year in 4 games.
Gotcha. All right. Any other names that stand out when I look at this roster? I see Jalen Campbell leading the team in tackles. Trey Lang leading the conference in tackles for loss. You mentioned Taj Brown, who leads the team in sacks, and I think you said second in the conference in sacks as well.
Yeah, Jalen Campbell's a guy. I don't think he was he wasn't the guy they were thinking was going to be there. They had a guy named Deshaun Davis that transferred from Iowa State, but I think he had an eligibility thing and he didn't make it. But Jalen Campbell has been very good. He's been very quiet too, because he stays in the middle, and he's a guy that he does a good job of tracking down quarterbacks that are trying to scramble. He's done an excellent job of that. He's in on a lot of tackles. He's a very physical player. And then Trey Lang has given them the pass rush that they've been missing when Jordan Lewis is out. He's been a very good pass rusher. Been a very good defensive end. Jordan Lewis has been playing linebacker a little bit this year, so he's kind of been going back and forth between the 2 positions. I think they think he's at the next level. He can play linebacker. That's going to be his position. He's not going to be able to play end. But then they also got a freshman named Kelby Givens, who has really been a big surprise. He's a true freshman from Shreveport, and was the district MVP, defensive MVP in Shreveport in their Class 5A district last year. And he has contributed quite a bit.
Absolutely. And Coach Dooley, first year on the sidelines for the Southern Jaguars, of course, coming over from PV. And this game between Jackson State and Southern last year went down to the wire down in Baton Rouge, with Southern leading much of that game. And this team seems to be even better than last season. So talk about Coach Dooley. What has he brought to the table in such a short amount of time?
Well, I think he has he pulled everything together, and I think he's a good coach, and he's good at getting his team to focus. He doesn't reveal a whole lot, so you can't see it day to day. I mean, he is the toughest coach for getting a decent quote out of I've ever run into. You can ask him 4 or 5 times, and you get that same run around from him. Not like Dion at all, you know.
Oh yeah, that's opposite.
But I think he has consolidated this team. I think the best thing he did was he went out and got some talent. I mean, they've got good players, and a lot more good players than they had last year. Southern last year was good enough to win a lot of games. They were easily good enough to go 7-4 instead of 4-7, but they ran out of gas in the second half of so many games, and that the Jackson State game was just the clearest indication of that. You know, they I don't want to say they dominated, but they had control of the game until the final 6 minutes. And I don't know. So, but Dooley seems to have gotten the attention of the players. And I think that game against Texas Southern was a hiccup. And after that game, he got the ship righted, and they're rocking along. And Southern likes what they have now.
So you talked about, well, you said you didn't see Southern winning the game. You talked about what Jackson State, if they were able to shut down the run, what would you predict could potentially happen. But what would you say would be a key to victory for Southern if they can execute XYZ? What do you think that would have to be in order for them to take this one?
Well, they haven't been terribly hurt by turnovers this year. They've been good on turnovers. They got to continue to do that. They got to cut the penalties down. They leave a lot of yards and points on the field because of their penalties, and Dooley talks about it all the time. That's one thing he will talk about when they have a lot of penalties, and that's one thing they're going to have. They can't muddle around in this game. They cannot muddle around like they have a little bit against Jackson, up against Alcorn. They muddled around in that game. They muddled around a little bit last week, but they've got to stay out of those. They do pretty well. Okay, in second and third and long. They getting yards on first down. They've been able to make up for that. But I think it's the mistakes that they've made with the turnovers and penalties is what they've got to avoid in this game. And if it's raining like we think it's going to be, it's going to be particularly important.
Right. And of course, the big news dropping earlier in the week surrounding this game is, of course, ESPN College GameDay will be on hand. I mean, you're talking about an already electric atmosphere will be even more electric, of course, if the weather permits. But I mean, let's talk about the significance of that and what's kind of the buzz around Baton Rouge or on the campus of Southern University in terms of coming to Jackson while GameDay will be in town.
Well, I'm not going to have a place to park. I know that.
I won't either. So we're in the same boat.
Oh, it's going to, and that's the thing. The people are going to flood in for that. I know. I was talking to the quarterback club at Southern. They put bus trips together every week or whenever they have an away game, for any away game. And he's got 3 buses and they're full up. He doesn't have any more room. So I know they got 3 buses just from the quarterback club. People are going to drive. It's a short drive.
Yep.
You can drive up for the game and drive back. So I think people may come the day before and they want to be out there. I've covered LSU when they had game day on their campus, and it just doubles the number of people who come out early.
Wow.
So it's going to be people. There's going to be people everywhere, and they're going to be cars parked everywhere. There's going to be, people want to, they want to get up there close to the thing, hold up their signs. You're going to see all kinds of people holding up their signs. They're going to be, just from all different schools. So it really does put a charge into what is already, I can't believe, the Southern fans, when they start talking about Jackson State, they get more agitated than they do when they play Grambling. They really do, and it's because Grambling is like a family feud. They we're going to go see our friends and we're going to whip their butts, but our family. But boy, Jackson State brings out the vitriol.
That's the word. That's the word that we use. Same on this end with Alcorn. It's just totally different when you're talking about Southern. So we get it. So again, an amped up rivalry will be taken to the next level. I know if you saw it, but Neas Williams already on our social media talking smack, throwing a few jabs. Fun, humorous at Coach Prime. Yeah. But we love it, right? That's what we want to see. So it's gonna be an amazing atmosphere. No doubt about it. All right. Well, fans, get there early. We pray that the weather can hold off just a little bit, because this will be one for the ages. This will be one for the history books. We don't know when game day will come back to an HBCU stadium / campus. They've done the MEAC challenge and things of that nature. But as far as just being on quote unquote campus, obviously our stadium is off site. But this is huge. This is one for the record book. So we appreciate you for coming on. Thank you for your time, your knowledge. It's always a thrill to kind of see what you have in store in terms of what you write covering the team. So we're just looking for a huge atmosphere and a great game that's coming up Saturday.
Thank you, Corey. Maybe we'll get to do it again before the SWAC title game, huh?
Absolutely. Let's count on it. I'm penciling it in. Can't wait.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. And that'll do it for this episode of Tiger Talk with the 1400 Club. Thank you to all of our viewers. And again, be sure to download and subscribe to the podcast. Apple Podcasts and Spotify video users, rate and review the show. And everyone, Go follow Tiger Talk with the 1400 Club on Facebook and Tiger Talk 1400 on Instagram and Twitter. We're looking to do some big things with this platform to aid the athletics department, and it all starts with you downloading, subscribing, rating, and reviewing the show. And tell every Tiger that you know. We're on all podcast outlets: Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify Video, YouTube, and so on. And we'll be posting each episode on our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter pages. As always, thanks for your support. Go Tigers. Hashtag I believe. Hashtag pack the vet. Hashtag the I love.